Hello everybody, and welcome to the show. Today's video has been brought to you by Magic SFP by MDS-Link. So what I want to discuss today about these incredible little things, these Magic SFPs, is a use case and some demonstration, some theory first. And it's taken me forever to do these videos because I want to do it justice, and I have made a few videos about this and not been happy with the outcome. So anyway, just to, get this out of the way first, I've got a Cisco switch here with two Magic SFPs in it, by the way. There are a couple of flavors of the Magic SFP. Because this is Mocha 2.5, it is capable of 2.5 gigabits per second AG, but you can also use it as 2.5 literal. So there are two models. There's the SFP and the SFP Plus version, one of which can actually do 2.5 gigabits per second both ways, and one of which is 2.5 AG, which is for 1 gig in, 1 gig out, ultimately 1.25 gigs in either direction, which is your standard gigabit rate. So anyway, that being said, there's a couple of different devices that we would use in said networks, and one of them is the actual Magic SFP itself. By the way, my OBS screen is down here, so my camera's up here on my main screen. So if you wonder why I'm looking down like this, I'm just making sure I'm in frame. But anyway, back to the point. Here is a Magic SFP. See? It's an SFP transceiver with a heavy-duty heatsink on it. And here is a 2.5 gigabit Mocha adapter. So this is an actual Mocha endpoint, okay? And yes, they're compatible because Mocha 2.5 is a standard, which means any Mocha 2.5 equipment you want to use will work with it. So with that being said, this would be, by the way, this is an ad hoc type network, so all devices are equal peers on said network. 16 devices total, which would be 15 plus a master ultimately. So we would consider this one the master or the parent device on said network, mainly because it's an SFP, which allows us to add a Mocha interface to a switch on site. What is the major benefit to that? The major benefit to that is that you can have a switch aggregating these things to multiple floors or buildings. That's the idea. You use the switch with the Mocha adapters in them to centralize for the point of aggregation, okay? And that's feeding, like 15, 30, 60, or sorry, 45, 60, right? So that's the idea of these guys. You have a switch with all these little SFPs occupying them rather than a shelf full of these things, which just looks hacky, right? And then in the apartment units or whatever, you can install these things. Or let's just say that you're going across a parking lot or to outbuildings. You can have one of those on either side connecting the switches over existing coax. And of course, because this has a little bit more distance, which we'll test in the applied practical video, our lab that we're going to do, you can do about, I think I tested it out, don't quote me, we'll see this when I do my lab again, 750 feet on these guys at full modulation. So now with that being said, let's go to my demonstration. This is the website for MDS-Link. So you can see here, this is what the little guy looks like, okay? Some of the images might not be up to date because these guys are more or less focusing on the product rather than the website. Don't hold that against them because who cares? I mean, we're ultimately like, there's a 3D print, right? I'm holding the product, or I've got the product right here. It's real, so don't be one of those people, and the reason why I bring that up is that there have been people like that. So anyway, this is just demonstrating it on the main page. Now, this is where we can buy them. You go to your partners, where to buy. I know for a fact here in Canada that you can get these guys from TDL. So that's Trent Distribution. They have them here. Let's check out North America and see what we got here. So what do we got here for North America? Maybe not a great example. There's nothing listed on here yet, but you can find these around. Just look for them. And if you have any problems, just let me know and I'll help connect you with the right people. Okay, but again, I know in Canada here we can get these through TDL. These are now available on the market. And I'm pretty sure ISP Supply sells these as well. And I think SWG. Okay? SWG. You guys are awesome. All right, so let's see here. Now, with that being said and my plug out of the way, let's take a look at some use cases. And by the way, I want to bring up a site as well. Let me just go to my documents here because I actually have, where is it? D drive, OBS, there we go, YouTube. There's a site that I'm going to post in the description that discusses Mocha in a little bit more detail, which I myself was parsing to find out some information on the different topologies and the appropriate industry names for them. This is mochaalliance.org/access/index.php. I'm pretty sure if you go to mochaalliance.org, you're going to get taken to this website. This talks all about Mocha 2.5. It talks about its functionality, specs, applications, and the different topology types. So this will be in the description for the YouTube video itself, okay? Now that that's out of the way, and by the way, thank you everybody at the mochaalliance.org site for, providing this awesome information to the public. All right, so let's take a look here. I want to show you a few different examples and use cases for these guys because these are kind of awesome. I mean, like, they're pretty cool. So, like, you can use them not only for trunking, but you can also use them for distribution, last mile, per se. Now, the reason why these things are so special, some of you guys might be like, well, I'm just going to go and buy some of these Mocha adapters. Well, no. You can stick this in existing devices. You've got a Cisco switch there. You've got a MikroTik switch. And by the way, just an FYI, MikroTik love these things, and they're adding more support for them. They already work in MikroTik switches and devices, no problems. But there's talks of more support, so let's just leave that. So anyway, you can have existing devices, like say this example here, where you have these guys in there using the existing coaxial infrastructure to feed sites. So now, let's say that you've already got coax going between a housing block or within a huge apartment complex or whatever. Rather than having to run new cabling, you can use that existing coaxial line for multi-gigabit access, right? So that's the idea. You can use this for distribution. You can use it for trunking, whatever. So in this example here, let's say that you just picked up a small housing complex. Say, I'm just going to arbitrarily say 4 buildings, okay? We've got 4 buildings here. This is in the country, okay? So you know that there's really no DOCSIS. Here, let me just turn my mic down. I think I'm speaking too loud. There we go. You know that there's no DOCSIS on site, okay? So you know you've got nothing to worry about, although this will coexist with DOCSIS if you set it up appropriately. So let's just, for all intents and purposes, say there's a coaxial network in place at this housing complex. They've got no internet there. They want internet. So you're a small ISP. You come in and say, okay, well, shit, you guys aren't far from our tower. We can hook all these people up. And there's coax everywhere. So now let's take a look at what we got here. We can take over the plant there. Just say use a 60 gig millimeter wave coming in, like maybe an air fiber 60, right? You bring that into something like a MikroTik CCR 2004. Yeah, I know, MikroTik and Ubiquiti, my favorite combination, right? So anyway, you bring in a wireless uplink that's capable of like a gig or more, feed into this 2004, and now you can take advantage of the existing coaxial infrastructure feeding all the different buildings on the premise. So what you do is, say you throw a small switch, like one of these guys. You can say take a Cisco switch or a MikroTik switch, whatever switch you want. I always use managed switches in telecom. Do not use unmanaged. I have my reasons. It doesn't give you any layer 2 control or isolation if you don't. So the idea here is that you just get a layer 2 switch, whatever flavor you want, drop it in at each building, and drop one of these Magic SFPs in it. Now you can tie that in to the existing coaxial feed that's going between the premises. So if we were to say that our head end here was able to connect 4 separate buildings, okay, we could bring in our uplink to this CCR 2004, and I'm using that one because the 2004, and this is just an example, use whatever you want, remember, it's got a bunch of SFP ports in it, and they are multi-gig. So now we could say use the SFP Plus version of the Magic SFP, and we can tie a switch at this building into the router at the main building. And we can do the same thing for building red. We can do the same thing for building blue. And we can do the same thing for building yellow. So now we've got trunk connectivity from our main POP, our demarcation point on the premise, to all the buildings out there. Now, however we distribute within the building itself is up to you. Maybe you've already got Ethernet access going through the whole building. Maybe you're using GFast at the building. Or maybe you want to continue using the Magic SFPs to feed the units with gigabit access using Mocha. So there is my trunking example there. You can take whatever flavor device you want for your head end, backhaul into it, or even hook up fiber with the router, whatever. And then use your Magic SFPs to feed the other buildings on the premise. So there's one application for it. And again, with the SFP Plus version, that gives you 2.5 gigabits per second over your trunk line. So that's a really handy use right there, which saves you having to run fiber between the buildings if that's cost prohibitive, if the whatever reason. You get the point. I don't need to rabbit hole that too much. Now let's take a look at floor distribution, because I want to keep this short and sweet for all of you guys out there that are ADHD like me. So let's take a look at one of the examples of floor distribution. So we're going to go to building red here, and we're feeding this thing with a Mocha adapter going into our layer 2 switch, okay? So now, say we've got 3 floors here, and each of these 3 floors have, say, I don't know, 4 apartments. You could take a Mocha adapter, and you can simply feed the coaxial line going to each floor, and then from there break out to each of the units. And then each of the units, you would have one of these little Mocha adapters. So these guys would be the customer endpoint that they would connect their own router into. It's essentially a media converter. I have not seen the specific examples of them, but you can get these in multiple flavors. You can get these that will actually have like Wi-Fi and whatnot on them. If you can find the links to those devices, because I've been told that they exist and I have not had time to find them myself, put the link in the comments for the others who are watching this video. But the point is this is your media converter feeding the apartment, okay? So now you're using the existing coaxial infrastructure. You've got, say, arbitrarily 3 of these Magic SFPs. One is feeding each of the distribution splitters on each floor, okay? And then all the units come back into that. Now you give it access to each of the units using this. Very, very simple. Dedicated direct feeds, okay? Let's take another use case example, okay? We'll look at a different type of floor distribution. Let's just say that you've got, say, 12 units in total in the building. You've got 3 floors with 4 apartments each, okay? Well, that's still less than 15 devices. And remember, Mocha 2.5 supports 16 ad hoc peers, which means you've got 15 devices that can connect into your Magic SFP. So say you put a something like a 4011 here, okay? Or maybe a 1009, or maybe just another switch, like just a small switch to act as your point of demarcation for that site to allow you for more layer 2 control. You bring in your link, you send out your link. So you connect your Magic SFP to your demarcation device in the building, and then you can say feed each one of these guys here. So in this example here, the drawing's probably not the greatest, sorry. Anyway, you can feed into your first distribution block. From there, jump to your next distribution block, jump to the next distribution block. That will allow you to carry it through, because with coax, it's basically just this kind of a self-contained enclosed RF network. So there's a lot of things you can do as long as you stay within your RF budget. So that being said, you do have a distance budget, and remember that with each of these splitter blocks, you lose a certain amount of RF. You have some attenuation. In some of these guys, they'll actually amplify and boost depending on the ones that you're using, but you have to make sure that anything you use is Mocha compliant, and you have to make sure that it operates within the frequency range that the Mocha devices do, okay? So that's something to be aware of, which we will go over in the lab. I actually have more examples coming up now. So let's take a look at this one. So here is an actual kind of in theory type, like how it has to be set up within the building itself, okay? So now we're going to pretend that there's already cable in this city that's feeding this building, okay? But we're going to come in and we're going to provide service, whether it's through a fiber connection or whether it's through a backhaul, wireless backhaul feeding the site. So when we come in from the street, there's usually an amp. So you'll come in from the street pedestal to the building amp, okay? And that's usually a little, well, it's not little. And they get really hot. Like I used to, when I was doing telco back in the day as a wet-nosed, green-nosed pup, I would actually put my lunch and my coffee on top of the DOCSIS amp in the building, the cable amp, and keep my stuff warm. There's a little tip for you guys. Hot equipment keeps your stuff warm. So now one of the things you have to be mindful of is you do not want your Mocha to backfeed just in case it overlaps with the existing DOCSIS networks that are present. And I'm going to bring up one more point. Some of you might say, well, if there's DOCSIS, why even bother going into the building? It really depends. Is the DOCSIS provider good? There's a big rabbit hole there. I'm not going to go down it. Let's focus here. So we've got a PoE filter. This is your premise filter. So the purpose of this filter here, point of entry, not power over Ethernet, point of entry. This little filter here, actually, let me pause and I'll go and grab one, even though we're going to do it in the lab. Pause. Jump cut. All right, so here is a PoE filter. This is a point of entry filter. This little guy here goes in line with your primary injection point and your amplifier. Now again, there's a lot of different ways to do this, so I'm just giving you some generalized examples, okay? So let's take a look at a small building, say of, 10, 12, 15 units, whatever, right? So we're going to basically tie into the RF. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use a splitter combiner, and we're going to have our existing street DOCSIS coming through our PoE filter to stop our Mocha from going back out into the street and getting us in a lot of trouble with the local cable provider, okay? We're going to bring our filter connection into one side of the splitter combiner and then connect our Magic SFP to the other one. From there, we can go into the building distribution block, which then goes to the floor distribution block to feed the units on the floor. This is just one use case. Now, I've consistently used a MikroTik CCR 2004 just because you guys will now recognize this from the first slide as the router that we're using here. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination saying that you must use a 2004. Use whatever suits you. There's tons of different products out there, okay? So this is just one example, all right? And this is also to provide you a theory and to let you know that you must filter before you come into the building because you do not want to pollute the local network there as well. All right, and here, of course, I've put down an example of the splitter that we need to use, our splitter combiner. Our gear needs to be 2600 megahertz compatible, okay? Now, in that website that I provided, by the way, it does have the operating frequencies and channels that these guys use. And to keep things short and sweet and to the point and not 45 minutes long, I can do another video talking about all the aspects and elements of Mocha if you'd like, but I'm to the point. There is a lot of information out there telling you what the channel range is, what the frequency range is that these the Mocha works on, right? So you can Google that. Or just leave in the comments below that you want a video talking about Mocha and DOCSIS theory, and I'll do it, okay? So anyway, here's another example of a method of distribution, okay? So let's say we come in from the street. Let me make this bigger. And I mean, like, there's so many different ways to do this. This is another reason why I like this product, is that it gives you a lot of diversity of what you can do. So if we look here, you can see we come in from the building amp, okay, and we're coming to the floor distribution block, okay? Now from there, we're usurping this before it goes to each floor. So let's say that we've got 10 apartments per floor, okay? So we can actually put a premise filter in between the splitter and the main distribution block, which will allow us to inject a dedicated Mocha signal for each individual floor. Now, you would want to use this if the cable runs are long or if there's a lot of splitters in line, okay? Because, remember, the Mocha does have a limited distance of operation, unlike DOCSIS. So, you want to make sure, I'm going to put this aside because I keep grabbing the wrong thing. Anyway, so you want to make sure that, like with fiber, you're aware of your link budget. And you want to make damn sure, like with anything else, when you're doing an installation, you test it. So every time you go into a apartment, you test it. You want to test it at the floor. You want to test it at the main Mocha demarcation. You want to test as you're going through step by step for each segment that you're building to ensure that everything is operating without any issues. Because you don't want to just toss it in, assume everything's fine, and then your installer goes to set people up and he says, why isn't this working? Oh my God, what do I do? And then you blow a day trying to fix things. You fix it before it goes live. You make sure everything's happy. So again, for a larger building where you've got RF, you've got coax going through the entire building, you can actually intercept each feeder that's going to each floor. Now, in some cases, you're going to find that it is stacked like this. So going through the whole building, you'll have a big, fat coaxial cable that goes up to each building, and then there's a splitter that goes off, or sorry, each floor. It'll go up to each floor, have a splitter that carries through and goes floor, 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 floor. So you'll have one coaxial trunk that goes through the entire riser of the building with a tap that takes off to the distribution for that floor. If that's the case, you might end up having to run a little bit more coax if there's, too many units, okay? And why run coax instead of fiber is because you can run it up to the floor and you can just intercept the way that I'm demonstrating here. So you could say, put your splitter combiner on each floor with your PoE filter, right? And then you can actually have that feed each floor. There's a million ways that you can do this, like I said, but it's all about keeping your cable runs to the minimum so that you can get the highest modulation on the Mocha network as possible. So that's where this sort of build out would actually come in handy. So yeah, say you've got a 5-story building or a 10-story building and there is only one trunk line going up with taps feeding the distribution blocks on each of those floors, then yes, you know what? You could actually run some additional coaxial feeds up that same bored hole alongside the main feeder coax up through all the floors just to carry your Mocha signal. So that's another option, you know? You could also put a small device like, say, a Hex S. Let me pause. Jump cut. So you could take something like a Hex S, say, and put one of these on each floor if the building was big enough and the cable runs were too long. And you could, say, run something like a piece of Cat5. So you could put these all in switch mode, right? Put one on each floor, and then carry a couple of Cat5 feeders up alongside the coax and daisy chain these, but keep them within a reasonable concentration, I guess a reasonable population, so that you're not limiting the amount of throughput you can provide for your units. Then on each floor, you can do a splitter combiner. So you can actually have this mounted up with the cable plant on that floor, have this guy go into your splitter combiner to feed the floor distribution, and feed it with Ethernet. You see what I mean? Like, this tool has so many different uses. There's a million ways you can use these things. You can be very creative to use existing coaxial infrastructure. So, my opinion, because I've already done this video and the lab video once before. Actually, I did this video a couple of times before. So I know that they perform. And I have tested them, and I've proven that they perform. So I do believe in this product. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know what more there is to say about this. There's a lot of different ways to use this. You can just be creative. But as always, having a full understanding of how the product works, what its limitations are, and what the compatibilities are, will really help you to determine how your build-out is going to be. So whether you're using these guys for trunking to get you to different locations using existing coaxial infrastructure, or whether you're actually just using these for distribution to the units, they're a diverse product, and they're very capable. And it saves you having to have a million of these things when you've got a switch with a bunch of these things in it feeding out. And you know what? As far as GFast goes, I believe that these fall within the same constraints as GFast, but I could be wrong, because I do recall with GFast that you could only put so many ad hoc devices on them, and I'm not sure whether the coaxial, that'll have to be another video I do. I'm going to have to do a video on GFast, but I think that they're very comparable to GFast, so this is a cheaper alternative to GFast, essentially. So you'd have this in the switch, this in the unit. Simple as that. Rather than having about a dozen of these down on the main floor. And by the way, these things are nearly the same price. So we're not talking about an overpriced product that's pointless. No, these are cool. And I can see a lot of uses for them. And as you guys know, historically, when I find something cool that fits a niche, because I work with a lot of you guys, right? This is what I do. I'm a consultant. I've seen all sorts of different systems and all sorts of different designs and all sorts of different challenges. And these definitely fit one of those design challenges that I've run into in the past, which is why I'm in love with these things so much. So, yeah, I hope that video was informative enough to show you guys a use case and give you guys some ideas about how to set these things up. And, of course, save you guys from actually having made a mistake like backfeeding your Mocha into the local cable network and getting a phone call from the cable company. Yeah, and by the way, end users have done that before, which is how I know about that little problem. End users, who are ITs, find these things and run them inside their homes, and it's just like, oh, oops, I didn't get the premise filter, which I threw over here. Premise filter. Point of entry filter. So anyway, I hope that was informative. Don't forget to like and subscribe. My audio's been a little funny on this one, but hey, you know what? If it's crunchy, just let me know. So, like and subscribe. If you guys want to help feed me, join the Patreon. If not, thanks anyway. And leave your comments below. As much information as I can possibly get from you guys about making these videos better, or what I've done wrong, or what you would like to see. I make these videos for you guys. It's not for the good of my health. So just fill me in. Anyway, thanks guys. Catch you later.